Donald Trump will have a phone call tomorrow with the Russian President Putin. They will talk about a potential peace deal. We'll talk about this as well as about what's happening on the ground, where the Ukrainians hold on to the last pieces of Kursk, while the Russians have started a new offensive in the direction of Zaporizhzhia city. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month by using my link. You get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. The Russians have struck another city with a double tap attack after Kryvyi Rih and Solovkhiv. They now also hit Bohoduhiv. In each attack, they did wait a while to allow time for 8 groups, for 8 personnel to arrive before a second strike hit the same target. While those accusations are not proven in all cases, in some cases, for instance, from Kiev, we even have visual evidence in the past that the Russians did do double tap attacks, so it seems likely this time that they also happened. We'll switch to the developments on the ground, and here we start off with Kursk. The Russians have advanced further from Sucha in western direction. We have it here, a geolocation where they are in the town of Goncharovka. The town itself is contested or probably taken as of now, where the Ukrainians have been pushed back further. There's also a report from the BBC which is talking about the situation here. They say the Ukrainians are facing 70,000 enemy soldiers. That includes 12,000 North Korean. Since the 9th of March, the logistics has basically collapsed because of the fire control of the Russians over that one route of supply here. Organized supplies in weapon, ammunition, food and water are no longer possible, is a quote from that article. The Russians have also sent their best drone units, according to the Ukrainians, to fight the Ukrainians, and a lot of fiber optic drones are being used there. The road itself is increasingly blocked by wreckages, according to Ukrainians who have fought there, and one of them who gave an interview to the BBC told that he had to leave Sucha on foot by night, and drones have dominated the whole ground. He himself almost died several times, according to his report. Interesting though is that we have Wargonzo, one of the big Russian mill bloggers here, giving an interview with one of the Russian commanders there in the location, and he's saying that the Ukrainians have superiority in drones in Kursk, and that's making it more difficult for the Russians. The interesting part is that basically both sides claim that the other side has superiority in drones, so maybe this is a claim to have a justification while the Russians take for that time, or it could be a sign how both sides see the obstacles they face, but kind of ignore what obstacles the other side faces, an indication how subjective the situation can be faced. Interesting also is when we see the rest of the area here that is still held by the Ukrainians. If we compare it to a topographic map, you can see why the front line is being held here. We have an altitude here of 209 meters, and Sucha itself is at 140 meters. So at that distance of roughly 2 kilometers, the area is rising by 60 meters. That's not too much, but we see that the Ukrainians basically completely are on the high ground here, which will be an explanation while they are still there. According to the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, the Ukrainians will hold out there because it is advantageous for them. But obviously, one of the reasons will likely be that it's important for diplomatic reasons and for morale reasons to stay inside of Russia for as long as possible. The supply issues should continue at this point. I do not see how anything should have massively changed for the road along here, especially with the Russians having reached Basivka at the same time and thus being even closer here. So we'll have to see how this continues here, whether the Ukrainians will be forced to withdraw soon, but as of now they are still holding some territory inside of Russia. That's it From the Sucha region, we switch to Kharkiv, and there is nothing to report. No change in territory can be recorded. The usual thing, fighting is being reported, but nothing else. We switch to the Eastern Front, and here we have a report from the Ukrainian army inform, and the interesting part is that they are saying, a Ukrainian commander is saying that they try to set up pontoon bridges here, throw pontoon bridges. It is important for the enemy to ensure stable logistics. So the Russians are trying to set up pontoon bridges. So far, if we take it by the letter, they have not succeeded yet. Obviously, the distance is fully inside of artillery range, most of the time probably even inside of mortar range. If we see it here, yeah, it should actually be. Like this is... If we take this, it's 4 kilometers. A heavy mortar is fully inside of range here and thus can attack the pontoon bridges. But this explains also the difficulties the Russians have here. Bringing a few infantrymen over to the other side is a whole different thing than setting up pontoon bridges that would allow them to bring heavy weapons to the other side. The Russians also have this fighting is obviously also continuing here, and we actually have a Ukrainian advance here at Raihorodka. This is southeast of where the Russians have reached the Oskil. If we look at the geolocation here, we can see that the Ukrainians have reached that forested area. They are being struck by the Russians at this point, so we cannot confirm whether or not this area was taken, but it shows us that this is probably a contested area as of now, according to the geolocations. That was it, though, north of the Seversky Donetsk. We go to the area south of it, and here we have the Russians having advanced in the area of Seversk once again. North of Verkhnokamiansk, the Russians have advanced once again. We have it here, and this is that forested area directly north of Verkhnokamiansk. So the Russians have reached this point here. We recently had them here. So to which degree the deep state map is still correct here is obviously unclear. This video shows successful Ukrainian strikes on the Russians. So theoretically they might have been wiped out there, but we do not see all the details. They might still have gained a foothold in the area here. Generally, we see that the trend is moving further west in the direction of Seversk over the past 2 weeks or so. Further south in Chasiv Yar, we have a video evidence as well. Picture of a Russian soldier being having fallen in the high-rise area in the center of Chasiv Yar, southwest of the factory. So basically showing us that Russian military presence has at least temporarily been in this area. That's it. From the area of Chasiv Yar and Seversk, we go to Toretsk, and at Toretsk we have numerous geolocations at this point, and we see those are all Ukrainians. So Ukrainians are still deep inside of the center. Those two houses apparently were never taken by the Russians, and this time it showed artillery shelling on them, so it proves that the Ukrainians are still here. They are also operating still up here and here north of the stadium. We have more geolocations showing them east of the stadium, west of the stadium in those buildings. Here those apparently are also being held by the Ukrainians for at least most of the time, if not all of the time, and the Ukrainians have also operated here again. They are also in the south at an area between the northern waste mount and the southern ones. Also Ukrainian operations here, which seems to indicate that the Ukrainians had some successful counterattacks in the area. We go towards Pokrovsk, and here we have the Russians advancing. Shevchenko is the first thing. We have them here in the southern part, in the western part of the town. So the Russians have reached this part. According to what I've seen, Shevchenko had likely been liberated by the Ukrainians. I don't know why the deep state map hasn't shown it to us. Like I said in the last situation report, the geolocations would indicate that Shevchenko had likely been liberated. Now the Russians have a presence inside of Shevchenko again, and we do see them inside of Piszczane as well, here in the northern part of that industrial setup or agricultural setup. They are, once again, that should be more or less at this point here, also showing again Russian presence inside of Piszczane. That was it from the Pokrovsk front. I do not see any change in Kurachovo either. There's no change in Velika Novosilka area as well, but we do have changes in the Graf Vasilivka or in the Zaporizhzhia area here. The Ukrainians were reporting intensive attacks by the Russians towards Mali, Shcherbaki and Shcherbaki, those two towns. We now have fresh geolocations coming in as well from this point here that the Russians have actually entered Mali, Shcherbaki at this point and are in the center of town. The Russians themselves claimed that their advances are much bigger than this. As you can see, they show Stepove here. This is from this is from Riba, a pro-Russian mill blogger. It shows that Mali Shcherbaki is contested. The south of Shcherbaki is contested. And according to them, they claim that Stepove is mostly taken by the Russians. I have not seen visual evidence yet, and I have not seen the Ukrainians admitting defeat in this region. So at this point, it's still questionable whether it's true, but we do know that the Russians have started new attacks here and gained additional ground in this direction. This shows us that the Russians are now apparently taking up their planned offensive again in the Zaporizhzhia region. We talked about it in the past that the Ukrainians said the Russians aimed to reach Zaporizhzhia to capture it, to get close to the city. One of the arguments for the Kursk offensive is that this might have led the Russians to withdraw units from this area away towards the Kursk region, and we do have evidence that actually units have been withdrawn from that area to face the Ukrainians in Kursk, but now it seems the Russians are restarting their initiative to reach the Dnipro at Zaporizhzhia here and to advance towards that city of, I think, over 200,000, so it's quite a sizable city. And as you surely know, this the Russians have annexed the whole region without even controlling it, and Zaporizhzhia itself is the capital of the oblast of that oblast Zaporizhzhia that the Russians have annexed. That was it with the developments along the front line. So the Ukrainians still hold on to Kursk. We do not know how long they will be able to hold out. They are on the high ground, which is to their advantage, but their supply line is probably stretched and under threat. In the Pokrovsk region, the front line has mostly stabilized. Toretsk also, we do not see sizable Russian successes. Also Chasiv Yar, even though in the Seversk region the Russians are slowly gaining ground. And now the new thing that has started is an offensive in Zaporizhzhia region. We see that the pro-Ukrainian deep state map is now giving Piatikhatki, half of it, to the Russians, and they have acknowledged advances to the north here. So the Russians seem to take up an offensive in this direction. We have information about Ukrainian developments as well. First of all, we talked about the drone nets in the past, and this is an example of how those drone nets can actually be successful. This is a fiber optic drone that was caught by one of those nets, and as you can see, it's still moving, so the operator might still be trying to regain make it fly again, but it was actually caught by one of those nets, showing us that they can be of use. This is another interesting video. Recently, I think last or second to last situation report, I showed you the interceptor drone of the Ukrainians that is basically like a fighter plane hunting down enemy drones, and now we have a video of how it looks. It's clearly the same drone here, and it shows some interesting features. First of all, obviously it's shaped like a plane, so the efficiency is much higher than a quadcopter, and we have the camera mount here that we've seen in the video itself with the aiming mechanism right in front of it. And what we see here, that apparently it wasn't just 2 rounds of shotgun, but the drone seems to carry 4 of them. That it has a reloading mechanism seems highly unlikely, but this at least gives it 4 rounds to shoot down enemy drones, according to what we see here. In the political sphere, we have the US president saying in an interview on Air Force One that he's going to have a phone call tomorrow on Tuesday with Vladimir Putin. Assets are going to be divided up, is his words that he chose. He is especially talking about territory and power plants. He said, I think we'll be talking about land. It's a lot of land. It's a lot different than it was before the war, as you know. So obviously he will talk about territorial concessions for the Ukrainians. He's basically going to talk about with Putin what territory Ukraine will have to give up, according to him. It's obviously unclear to which degree what he will say, what he will demand. The at least potential, at least theoretical bandwidth is massive. It could be a withdrawal to the lines of 2022, but it could lead. This could probably be. This would be much more than can realistically be expected. In worst case, it could mean that he would acknowledge Russia's claim to the 4 additional oblasts that were annexed, and thus demand the Ukrainians to withdraw from the rest of Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. We'll have to see how that turns out, what he will talk about, that what the conclusion will be in the negotiations with Putin. He also said we'll be talking about power plants. That's a big question. Here, it's very likely that the talks will be about the Zaporizhzhia power plant in Enerhodar up here. This is a massive power plant, I think with 6 reactors. So the value of it is in the tens of billions of US dollars, according to current prices. We'll have to see what the negotiations will lead to in this regard, but we have to understand so far Russia has not reduced any of its claims, any of its demands at all. It's still demanding the complete Ukraine to give up all the territory that Russia has annexed in 2022. Thus, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and the small parts of Luhansk that are not occupied yet. It's like 1% or even less of the territory here. He's still demanding that. Putin is still demanding that. He's also still talking about the Istanbul negotiation, where at the beginning of the war, the Russians were demanding basically something like a Versailles Treaty from Ukraine, 85,000 soldiers, no purchasing of foreign weapons, missiles with no longer range than 30 or 40 kilometers, a few hundred tanks. I think it was like 300 tanks or something. So basically a better police force. Ukraine, that was one of the demands that the Russians had in 2022. And this, so far, the Russians are still insisting that this would be a way towards peace. Also, no security guarantees that are to speak of. So no NATO membership, no European troops. The talk now is about civilian observers, which would be exactly that. They would observe, but not stop Russia in any ways. According to the British, though, we have the Prime Minister said that over 30 nations are willing to send troops to guarantee the peace, to be peacekeepers in Ukraine, but in the end, it'll all depend on a US support for that, which seems highly unlikely. The US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said there will be security guarantees for Ukraine in exchange for territorial concessions was the word I was looking for. So for territorial concessions, there will be security guarantees, but the US will acknowledge the reality on the ground. Again, it's completely unclear what that is supposed to mean. Is that supposed to mean that it accepts that Russia is inside of Ukraine, or will it mean that US will accept and acknowledge the annexation? Obviously, there's a vast difference in potential results, whether or not where a future demarcation line is being drawn, and whether that will demand from Ukraine to actually give up on their territory and thus acknowledge those annexed parts as Russia, or whether Ukraine will just acknowledge that Russia controls them as of now, but still retain its claim to it. We'll have to see how this will turn out, and at the same time, what kind of security guarantees are likely there is highly questionable, as the US have already made clear that they do not want to help Ukraine getting into NATO, and they do not want to give security guarantees themselves. So we'll have to see and find out in the next situation report if we have any additional information. Additional things are also still available for Ukraine because weapon aid is still coming. Germany has sent a new package, 3 Cheetah SPAAs. Those are basically the Dutch version of the German Gepard. Also 24 MRAPs from FFG, 2 Wiesent 1 mine-clearing vehicles, and a huge number of assault rifles, drones, mine-clearing equipment, other equipment as well. So a new German package has come with a lot of ammo as well, obviously. But that is it for this situation report. That's all I have for today. So if you like this situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Add what you, if you have something to add, then use the comment section. Feel invited to do so. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.